Welcome back to Chain of Thought for the last episode of Season 1. I'm your host, Connor Bronsden, and today we have a special guest, Vinnie Giarrusso, Principal Software Engineer at Twilio. Vinnie, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks, Connor. Thanks for having me here. Excited to hang out today.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you, learn more about the work you're doing at Twilio with AI agents, and to have you back on the podcast. For listeners who may have listened to last week's episode, we actually featured Vinnie as part of our panel of guests at Galileo's Productionize 2.0 conference. He had conversations about applied AI, lessons from deploying AI at enterprise scale, and his work at Twilio. But there's lots more that Vinnie's working on around Twilio's AI assistants. Can you start by giving us some background on how Twilio is currently using AI agents?
So Twilio, we're building a low-code autonomous agent platform. And so what that really means is we're building a set of tools for our developers to deploy their AI systems at scale and leverage all the other cool Twilio stuff that they're, used to getting from us. We provide APIs on top of this. We manage the deployment. We manage the invocations. We manage all the sort of like back-end heavy stuff for you. So really what we're focusing on is providing a lot of value to just getting an agent out there, testing it, asking it questions around your domain, and just seeing how fast people can go from 0 to 1, essentially.
It sounds like Twilio is really empowering its customers to build their own agents with this framework you're establishing. Can you add a little depth around how exactly Twilio's tools provide for this purpose?
So Twilio's agent platform is like a fully featured agent platform. So we give you the ability to use tools. We give you the ability to use knowledge sources. You can upload your documents. You can crawl web pages. You can do all of that sort of thing. We handle the memory management for you. And on top of all of that, we put an API layer in front of it as well. So you can handle all of your deployments through the API. You can do all of your uploads through the API. You can talk to your assistant through the API. We actually call them Twilio AI assistants. The industry term is agents. When we first started naming the product, agent was of course one of the things we were thinking about, and we were like, well, I think everyone's going to use agent, so maybe we should do something else. And so we ended up with assistant, which I think is a good name, but also it's very similar to assistants, like not with a TS, but with a CE on the end.
Right.
There is that little mix up sometimes. But yeah, I mean, so we provide all of that on top of the Twilio API. And then the other great thing about Twilio is we have all the channels as well. So not only do we have this AI platform that we're building so that our developers can get in contact with their customers, but we're doing it in a way so that you can use the same Twilio channels that you're used to using: SMS, voice, WhatsApp, conversations, all of that sort of thing. All of those are natively integrated into our platform as well. So not only is it a platform for, building the agent, but also that next step as well. It's like, okay, so now you have this agent that can do some cool stuff. Like, how do you get it to talk to people? The answer is the same way that the rest of your Twilio apps work, hopefully.
I like that Twilio is differentiating a little bit from the rest of the industry and saying these are AI assistants. But I want to learn a bit more about how Twilio actually arrived at this approach and this tech stack to build agents. What were the lessons you learned along the way, and how did you get to where Twilio's AI assistants are today?
Yeah, I mean, regarding the assistant versus agent thing, that definitely was an intentional decision on our part to lean more towards assistants. We really feel like, especially at the beginning, these agents are going to play sort of a side-by-side role with humans. So these agents necessarily aren't going to replace the human role, but instead sort of augment that human role with additional capabilities that give it sort of like superhuman powers. And that's sort of how we're thinking about it, and we're framing it. They can interact with the humans who are maybe tasked for accepting or rejecting certain actions by that agent, or however you have this set up. That's where our mind is around assistants versus agents.
Yeah, I think you're spot on that there are these stages that are happening. And a lot of folks want to jump to this idea of fully autonomous agents that are the equivalent of high level employees. And there's a lot of work to do along the way. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of the hype around AI has been that, oh, it's this magical solve for you. But there's still a lot of work to be done to set up non-deterministic systems in a way that actually works for businesses.
Yeah, I mean, we see agents that are fully capable of doing amazing things today. that there are recent releases of agents that can use computers, recent releases of agents that can generate videos and long form videos and things like that. And that's amazing. I love that innovation. Like that is truly incredible to see some of the innovations that are coming out. But when we think about sort of like where the enterprise is sitting, the enterprise is going to be like a little bit more careful in our approaches. We're going to be a little bit more measured and conservative in what we put out there and what we expect our agents to do. And so we're really leveraging that as well. Like we know that our customers are expecting to be a little bit more careful. And I love this sort of like side by side, with certain parts of the industry pushing forward really quickly, other parts of the industry looking at that and saying, okay, like that's really cool, but I think that might be like a year out for us. But keep doing what you're doing, and we're going to focus on this thing over here until like all that stuff gets settled out. I think that that's probably going to be like the general trend for a little bit now. Everyone is working with the new latest and greatest, and it's pretty amazing. But when it comes to like actually getting the work done for businesses, it's a little bit of a different story. It's a little bit less of the Wild West, so to speak.
And I know enterprises in particular have to really consider, because they already have established distribution, established trust with their customers, accuracy, trustworthiness. How is Twilio actually ensuring that the AI agents or assistants that are being built through its platform are accurate and trustworthy?
This is a tricky one for us, actually. So for us as a platform, it's not quite as straightforward as us being able to run evals and say like this works, release it. We do that in some cases. So we run evals on like a set of cases that sort of generalize across some set of our customers. However, we can't predict how people are going to use our platform. We can't really predict how people are going to want to use it. And so what we see happen is, we see new use cases come in and, they might use different knowledge sources than we've seen before. Those knowledge sources might be formatted in a different way or contain information like kind of far away from each other. And in that way, it gives us a lot of viewpoint into like what is accurate and how accuracy really relates to the specific application. Because at a base level, the base models, we expect to accurately answer random questions, right? But for a business, those questions get very specific. Those questions can be specific to like, how much does a text message cost in Spain, for example, right? And that's a much different question than, how much does a text message from, another country maybe. And in that way, like accuracy is not so much like, does the agent accurately answer the question, how much is a text message, but it has to be very specific to where the user is. And maybe the user hasn't told them where they are. And so the agent might need to be smart enough to say like, oh, well, I have, this list of pricing, but I'm not really sure exactly what it's referring to because I'm not sure which one of these to pick. And so then the agent, instead of saying like, I don't know, or, picking one at random, accuracy really comes from the agent being able to turn around then and say like, oh, actually, I have, a variety of pricing. Do you happen to know where this is going to be located, or do you happen to have any more information about that? And so for us, like accuracy is a little bit more difficult to track down because it can come in the form of a very specific question that gets a very specific answer, or it can come through a series of, messages back and forth. How accurate is it over a course of a conversation as it's trying to figure out exactly what its job is and exactly what it's supposed to be doing here?
I really appreciate that detailed example, since I think it illustrates well some of the challenges with AI agents when they get into production. There are
Hmm.
all these edge cases that are just hard to correct for when you're building your initial wireframe and kind of getting things going. And not
Hmm.
until you start getting the different approaches and data from users do you really realize, oh, we need to correct this piece. And it
Hmm.
speaks to the need to continually be evaluating and continually be improving upon your AI applications, your AI agents. Are there particular failure modes that you've noticed as common or challenges that you're seeing that have to be addressed, whether it's in pre production or in production?
So one of the biggest challenges for us has been the sort of like RAG retrieval pipeline. It's pretty easy to go to, like the LangChain docs and get like a RAG pipeline going very quickly. But as you mentioned, as you start to scale it out, as you start to add more knowledge sources and more use cases, and then you add users on top of those sources that are asking questions that maybe you hadn't thought of before, this is really when the challenge starts to happen. You start to notice things like, well, the agent couldn't figure it out, and we're not really sure why, right? So we will go into our observability tools and look through that trace and see like, okay, like what did it pick out? Like what did it even pick the correct knowledge source, first of all? And if it picked the correct knowledge source, like what did the chunks look like? Did the top K come back in a way that was set it up for success to answer that question? And in a lot of examples that we've seen, that's not always the case where it comes back with a great set of top chunks, or it's not always the case where it picks the correct knowledge source, for example. We're relying on a couple of things to help that. One is like the amazing research that's going out by so many of the teams out there that are putting out white papers around this sort of thing. There was a great one about contextual search put out by Anthropic, which gave us a lot of really good information and a lot of great ideas. And there's just like a lot of work going on in this area, and it really shows sort of like how vague this can be when you start dumping, 10, 15, 20 knowledge sources in an LLM. Like the context becomes really important. Like it's when you first deploy an application and you start testing it, it's pretty easy to be like, oh, that works really well, or that works well for several use cases, but it doesn't often generalize super well. And that's where we've seen the need for, especially like context aware, retrieval has been like a game changer for us. That has like increased the accuracy of our retrieval. I don't want to give any hard numbers, but like a lot, a positive amount that makes us excited. That's one of them. Like knowledge retrieval is like one of those big areas that we've seen vagueness and failure modes abound. And it's a tricky one, but there's a lot of really great research going on, and it's getting better and better every day.
I don't want to generalize too much here, but I think this is something where we really underestimate the work that needs to be done to do this well at times. And the way I kind of think about this is, look, we as humans or as an LLM that's having a conversation, we may have a framework that we come in with of like, oh, this is the knowledge I have. This is how I would approach this problem. But the devil is in the details. There's a reason this phrase is always here. And to your point,
Hmm.
getting that context in and making sure that context is held throughout is so crucial.
Hmm.
And I'm curious about the specific processes or tools that Twilio is using for experimentation around this, for monitoring it, for debugging. How are you approaching that process with these agents?
Well, for monitoring, primarily we use Galileo. We've been using Galileo Observe basically since day -1. It was one of the very first things we integrated. It was one of the very first tools that we had set up, and that really set us up for success. Having that visibility from day one really allows the team to have good ideas. And so for us, like monitoring and debugging also have like a direct impact on innovation, because when we see these failure modes happen, if we're not logging those appropriately, or we're not really like capturing the things that are happening, we can't quite figure out exactly what happened, and we can't also quite figure out exactly what we should do about it. So Galileo has been like a critical part in helping us get through that, especially with the RAG retrieval pipelines and stuff like that. Like all of the observability tools in there have been super, super helpful for us to get in there and figure that kind of stuff out.
Vinny, I would love to understand more about how Twilio has established best practices around either your approach to evals and observability or the tooling you're leveraging to upgrade this entire process. How are you approaching this?
There's two sides to it. One side is how we approach evals, for ourselves, and the other side is how do we want to expose that to our customers. And in a lot of ways, there's quite a bit of overlap. And so a lot of what we do at Twilio is we'll take something that we see, we'll build something around it to solve our own problem, and we'll see what we need to improve on. What areas does that actually solve, and then is this something that maybe our customers could use as well? And so with our evals, we did exactly that. We started with building sort of like an open source framework for ourselves to use around evals. And this was specifically for when we started this, it was for security evaluations, but it has since evolved into evals more generally. And what we found was that this was really useful for us. And we wanted to open source this so that our customers could also use this. And so we have an open source package now that's based out of the Twilio Alpha, GitHub, and NPM namespace that allows our customers to run evals up against our own AI assistants. And we feel that this is really important because we can run evals ourselves and we can say it does X, Y, and Z under, A, B, and C scenarios some percentage of the time. But it's a lot more convincing when you put it in the hands of people that play with themselves, when you put it in the hands of people to like use their own use cases and ask their own questions and like really refine that for themselves and start to figure out like where are the gaps here? Where are the gaps maybe in my knowledge sources? Where are the gaps maybe in my prompting strategy? And do I have all of the context for my agent to be able to accurately answer this question? Like maybe you find out that you don't through your evals and maybe you have some work to do in other areas. So putting this out has been really helpful for us. It's helped us shore up a lot of things on our side, and we hope that people get a lot of good use out of it for themselves too.
Are there particular insights that you've already drawn from the way Twilio customers are using AI assistants today?
One insight is that I think in most cases, these agents, these assistants are going to be used side by side. And so a lot of our initial customers right now are maybe not thinking like we want to fully deploy these and just, let it go ham. I don't think anyone at this stage really wants that. What we're sort of like putting out for people is the ability to say, okay, here is our goal. Here is what we want our assistant to do. Here are the things that it has access to. I need to go test that, right? That process is really eye-opening for us because we can't know in advance how people are going to use our platform. We can't know in advance what use cases are going to come our way. And honestly, we are pleasantly surprised like all the time. Like every time someone new comes to us, the use cases are always interesting. It's like, oh wow, like that's super cool. Like, think about assistants, we tend to think about maybe a customer service assistant or something like that. But a lot of the use cases we see coming our way aren't necessarily that. And especially some of the ones that are more forward thinking get us really excited for like what's about to come.
Let's dive right into that forward thinking piece. Obviously, today, a lot of agentic systems are built with a human in loop in mind, where there's this validation step. But increasingly, we're seeing a rise in multimodal systems. We're seeing people experiment with frameworks that have agents talking to one another and supporting one another. What are your thoughts on what the future looks like for fully autonomous agents?
Well, I think in the long-term future, like fully autonomous, in the sort of like short to medium term future, I think what that looks like is, we're going to have these assistants be able to do tasks on their own. They may be scoped to do smaller tasks and have access to maybe another assistant that has scoped smaller tasks and its own goal of itself. There might be a layer above that that's sort of managing this cohort of agents that has very specific things that it can do. And I think at least in the short term, like one strategy I think could probably work well. I haven't tested this. I'm literally just sort of spitballing on the future. Is sort of like a stop mode or like a request help mode, for the assistant. Like we want the assistants to be fully autonomous to a point, right? Like there are things that an assistant can be trusted with to do just kind of fully on their own. And then there are things that, at least today, assistants should not be trusted to do fully on their own, especially in the early phase. And so a pattern that I think we're going to see sort of evolve is, have these assistants working, doing their thing, and then they'll get to a point where they're like, oh, actually, I need, for this step, I need human supervisor approval, or I need to check in regarding the series of steps that I took. And what that looks like on the other side, like, who knows, right? Like, maybe, it sends a recording of what the assistant was doing, and then the human can overview and whatever. And then while that's happening, we'll call you back in a couple of minutes, or like hang on the line while we approve this, or we'll send another correspondence. I'm not really sure what that looks like, but I think that measured approach, at least in the short term, is sort of where I think we might be going. But definitely in the future, I think these agents will be talking to each other from one system to another system internally, even internally to other external systems, and then those agents talking to other agents. Like this is going to get complex pretty quickly. And I think that it will really model and mirror kind of how we do things today. And I think, similarly to how we do things today, where, we don't always have the maybe necessary permissions to do something, or it might be outside of our job role specifically to do something. And we have to, maybe go over to another business function to get that taken care of and worked out and take a look at. I think that that's probably how this is going to end up, where today we're super stoked that, assistants and agents can do basically anything and everything, but that's probably not how it's going to, play out for a while now.
I absolutely agree. I think a really good framing for the short term of these AI assistants or AI agents is async junior digital employees, where there are certain tasks that they can go jump on, and there are certain things you need to give them feedback on, or that
Yeah.
maybe they're
I
not
love
ready
that.
for yet.
I love
Yeah.
that. Async, what did you say? Async junior digital. Yeah,
Yep.
that's cool.
Async junior digital employees, because we're creating this kind of digital employee class that are these AI agents, and the goal with it is, hey, I'm not going to jump on live to solve their problem, but I'm gonna get to your point a failure mode, or I'm gonna have a check-in point where I go, oh, here's how I correct, here's how I adjust. And I think where we're gonna increasingly have to spend a lot of time is not just on the kind of challenge of scaling that individual agent to senior level. A ton of folks are working on that problem. There's a lot of thinking happening there, but also in the structures of how those async junior digital employees function within the larger organization. If I'm managing a team of 10 AI agents doing different tasks, that is a lot of human overhead that I have to then put towards making sure all that is railed properly. So, how can I then have that hopefully more autonomous senior level agent that we are developing that's going to have multiple steps now start to be the judge within that framework? How does that all work together? It's going to be a
Mhm.
fascinating mix. And something
Yeah.
I've had a conversation with folks about a couple times is also how this plays into our broader hiring practices. I think we're already seeing this within tech, where a lot of junior employees are kind of struggling to take that next step because people in tech are hiring senior, I think in part with this anticipation of the future of saying, hey, I want more senior folks who I can scale with systems, who I can scale with, AI tooling, and who can really help solve these problems for me. And there's going to be this interesting problem for us where we've trained a lot of junior engineers, we've trained a lot of junior product marketers, we've trained a lot of, junior technical PMs who are coming out of college or coming off their first job, and getting them to the level of, hey, I can now be a senior who's managing this team of agents, this team of different processes that we've built up from these digital employees. How do we get them to that next step? And right now, I think we not only have this challenge around how do we get all these agents working together, but also how do we make sure that our junior folks within the tech ecosystem have that opportunity to scale so they can also start managing these teams of agents, which I really think is the future, at least in the midterm.
Yeah. I think that something interesting happens here too. I think that there's a lot of worry about agents taking work away and resulting in like a less personal experience.
Mm,
But actually, I think it's the opposite. I think that there's a huge opportunity here to use these assistants in taking away the boring technical work and the sort of like mundane tasks that would ordinarily be done by a human, instead letting them take that over. And like what the human agent can really focus on is that human to human interaction, right? Like everyone's had a tough time on a customer service call where it seemed like they didn't really understand like your problem. I mean, this happens to me, I don't know, half the time when I call. I'm not gonna just say any particular company. I'm always like, okay, actually, you don't really understand exactly what I'm asking, and I understand that you're sort of like reading from the script and like trying to figure out like how I fit into this like playbook that you have, but that's not what I really need. And so what I think that's going to happen is like when we do have these human to human interactions, the human that's there is not necessarily worried about like, oh, did I memorize like all of the, technical, things that could possibly happen before this? And like really by the time that problem gets to you, like hopefully the AI assistant has like sussed out some of those technical problems And now maybe like what you're dealing with is like, I have a human to human problem right now. I have a human that has like an actual issue, and we can be like a little bit more like empathetic and compassionate to that moment because we're not necessarily worried about like, ticking off all the boxes on our sheet that says like, did you ask them this? Did you ask them this? Like, have you gone through this? Like, we can safely assume like by the time it's gotten to a human, like those things are true. And, maybe you have a report that, the AI assistant like generated for you when you get that human call tells you what happened before that. But I think that there's like a huge opportunity to have a really positive experience and really build some positive experiences that we haven't had the opportunity to before, maybe even simply because that human agent just didn't have time to sit and talk to you about the problem.
Totally. Yeah, I think you're spot on. There's this massive opportunity space here to create more human interactions by automating all these, I'll call them annoying tasks in a way.
Mhm.
And we have to be intentional about how we approach this, but it's a big opportunity. And I think, hopefully for folks who are maybe more on the junior side who are listening, I'm not trying to scare you. I think there is this big opportunity that Vinny's describing where if you are building up the right skill set here, and in particular, I think if you are leveraging AI to help you learn. And by that, I mean, not just the agent approach that we're talking about, but like, hey, if you are onboarding to a new company, throw it all into your favorite GPT or Claude or whatever you want to use. Like, have it help you synthesize what you're going through, have it help you learn. There is such an opportunity to scale ourselves with machines today. And that
Mhm.
opportunity is only going to continue to increase. And to your point, we have to be careful to ensure that we're not getting rid of these human to human interactions, instead enhancing them. But it's a really exciting thing that's happening right now. And if you're in
Yeah.
this space today, I think you are in absolutely the right position to make an amazing impact on what the future of work looks like and what we get to do as a species in a lot of ways.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is my hope, right? Like my hope, there's definitely a lot of, sort of fear around like, how is this going to impact the future of work? And that is a big question. It's a question we should definitely be asking ourselves at this point. But, I choose to sort of believe that this will open up a lot of personal interactions for us. It'll open up a lot more human to human interactions in a way, even though, maybe some of it is going to get taken care of just straight up by an assistant. Like if you have a problem that only requires, hey, can you check my thing? Cool. Like that's great. But in those moments where you really need a human, maybe now you don't have to wait an hour. Maybe now you don't
Yeah.
have to wait so long to get a hold of somebody. So I'm hopeful for that. And with regards to like the junior engineer out there who's, maybe wondering how does this impact me? The opportunities are massive at this point. Like if you can be, amongst the first to stand side by side with AI and use these new tools to your advantage, like this is going to open up a lot of doors. It's going to open up a lot of opportunities. The speed at which you can learn is unparalleled today. The speed at which you can, you know, write code is unparalleled today. The speed at which you can get feedback is unparalleled today. But that doesn't mean that we don't need that senior mentorship anymore. One of my colleagues, Dominic Hundle, was talking about this in a quote that he had, where the senior to junior engineer relationship, there's an opportunity for this to kind of go away, unfortunately. Like the mentorship aspect might start to slip away. And, on both sides, like it's good for people who like really have a lot to learn because for the first time really like you have a personalized like mentor. You have, someone not someone but something. You have some being
We're
of some kind.
personifying them. It's happening. Yeah.
It's already happened, yeah. Um you have some system that you can interact with that can teach you personally. It can sort of really get to know you and know where you might need help and where you might need guidance. But that is certainly not a replacement for the direct interaction with the senior engineer. And for the senior engineers, it's really easy to forget what it was like to be a junior engineer. It's really easy to forget what it was like before like you were an expert in the thing that you're an expert in, even though like now we're here in this age, the ability for our colleagues to just kind of figure things out on their own with the help of AI. It's not a replacement for that mentorship. And I really liked, what Dom said about that, because that's something that has been on my mind as well. Like, not only are other industries sort of grappling with like what does AI mean for the future of our job, as engineers, like we have to ask ourselves the same questions. Like, are we eliminating roles for junior engineers? Like, are we eliminating the historical mentorship that goes on, even in just the conversations that we have day to day? Like when
Yeah.
we start having those conversations with AIs, like I'm not necessarily like sharing all of my conversations that I have with my team, although I do share some of them that are either like funny for some reason or like spectacularly good for some reason. But it's easy to like let that opportunity to slip away. And it's good to keep in the back of our heads too.
Yeah, I think as we continue to spend more and more time making sure AI has the context it needs and is bringing in the right context windows, we also need to be that intentional about our human interactions, to your point, where it's so easy to over focus on, oh, here's a technological solution. And we need to be careful not to let it eat away at the established work we've done to build these great mentorship relationships and build these learning opportunities. And I absolutely agree with you. I think there's a lot of work to be done there on the future. And I know there are a lot of smart people thinking about it, but I appreciate you getting philosophical with me and kind of making sure we address it here.
And I mean, the education space is one that I'm particularly excited about for AI. Like, I come from a non-traditional sort of computer science background myself.
Same here.
And, on my bookshelf right over there, I can peep at a number of textbooks that you might find in your college classroom, right? And when I was going through those, I kind of went through them on my own. And I wasn't really, I mean, these books are thick, man. Like, it's like, what do I even look at here? Like, how do I even like start to frame a context around this? Like, I have no idea. And that's even with the advantage of having access to those books, right? So like we have to start from the place where like I was advantaged enough to be able to buy that book. I was advantaged enough to be able to read that book and like understand that book and, go ask my colleagues like, hey, what is this like what does this symbol mean? Like how do I interpret this equation? I'm super excited about the way that this is going to change education. Like I'm super excited about the way that this is going to help teachers. I'm really excited about the ways that like kids and adults are going to be able to use these systems to personalize their own education on things that are important to them. The democratization of information is something that I'm super excited about to see evolve in the space. And education is certainly one of the biggest ones that I think is going to be a really cool sort of area of this advancement.
Totally. We are in this period of kind of reestablishing and rebuilding norms around how we approach information systems in this new era. And there's massive opportunity and a lot of work to be done. And with that context in mind, I would love to understand more about how you see that partnership evolving between Twilio and Galileo.
I mean, I hope our partnership is one where we continue to push each other forward. We continue to work together and look forward at the advancements that are being made and say, like, how do we integrate these into, our system, and how are you integrating them into your system? And what is the delta that we're sort of missing? And that's one of the things that like I've loved working with the Galileo team is that sort of back and forth around like, hey, like we saw that you're using, this thing, like how is it going? Like how is it working for you? And then us, coming back and saying, well, we really like that, but we'd also like this other thing that we happened to notice while we were using it. And that sort of back and forth is like it's such a great relationship to have between, two teams of like really talented people, because like we can go quick, we can go fast. We can sort of like hit on things. And, especially with where we sit in terms of like the amount of use cases we see and the customers that we see, and as it relates to like multimodal and all of those things and multi-channel, like I really look forward to pushing the envelope with y'all. And I really look forward to seeing like what can we do next? How far can we go? Like how far can we bring, visibility into these platforms? How far can we bring testability into these platforms? How far can we bring security into these platforms? Like, let's go, I'm so excited about that. The Galileo team is like obviously world class, right? And it's such a privilege for us to be able to work with that caliber of people and to be able to push the industry forward together. And I really hope that we continue that going forward. Yeah.
Right back at you, Vinny. It is such a distinct pleasure having the opportunity to learn from the work Twilio is doing. And with that in mind, I'd love to understand more about how Twilio is leveraging Galileo today in your process and how you see the potential for that to continue to evolve?
Primarily, we use Observe, and Observe for us is like, I was trying to think about this earlier. I was like, what does it mean to us, right? And the best example that I could think of is that like Galileo is sort of like our head chef in the kitchen.
Oh,
Like we have we have a bunch of servers out front, literally servers, right? But in the restaurant equation, they're also servers, so this works pretty well. We got a bunch of servers out front that are sending stuff in. They're taking stuff out, whatever. And when if you've ever worked in a kitchen, when something comes back to the kitchen, like that head chef is right there, right? That head chef, that executive chef, knows everything there is to know about what's going on. You can ask them like, "Hey, is there some random ingredient in this dish?" And the answer is, whatever it is. Of course they know. They also know how to do the job of like everybody else in the kitchen, right? So your executive chef can, in the same way that they can act as a line cook, they can also act as, they can get the food going between the expo and the front of house, or they can even take on other roles in the kitchen. Galileo is like, that's when I think about like at least the Observe platform, like the ability to just go in there and see everything. And not only see everything, but be able to gain insights too. The insights that we get from the Luna metrics, like we're always in there looking at one thing or another, right? Either it's context adherence or complexity or accuracy or any of the tone, like that sort of thing, like that's really important. And you also sort of get that from a head chef too, right? Like you can also, in the same way, you can go to the head chef and say like, "Hey, can you remake this dish?" Or, "Hey, can you tell me how you did this?" You can also ask a head chef for insights into like how they might improve on that. Use one ingredient over another, or why one ingredient works better in this case than another ingredient, right? And I realize I'm taking this example pretty far, but
no, I love it.
but that's sort of how I see it. Like your Observe platform is basically the go-to for any question that we have from any level of our team, right? Like from engineer to PM to business partner, like everybody who has access to Galileo has a specific reason to go in there and look for something, and they have the ability to find what they're looking for. And so for us, that's invaluable because we don't really have any other tools that scale that well across a team. There are tools that work well for our engineers, and there are tools that work well for our PMs, and there are tools that work well for our business partners. There are very few that work equally well across all of them. And so for us, like that's like critical for us.
I love to hear
Um,
that. I'm so glad Galileo has been able to help fill that niche for you. Has Galileo also influenced Twilio's approach to AI agent development and evaluation?
oh, absolutely, absolutely. The visibility that gives us provides us with the answers that we need, and in the same token, it also provides us with areas that are opportunities. Like for example, like if we're looking at something that has a low chunk adherence or a low context adherence, like we can figure out why. And by figuring out why, that shapes the way that we sort of like frame the question to ourselves. Why did this happen? It's like, well, that happened because maybe our assumptions about what would happen in that case turned out to be wrong. Or, we expected this to happen, and in a very small percentage of cases, like this happened. And so, leveraging those insights gives us the ability to take like a more rounded approach to like
Hmm.
how we're moving forward and what types of things we might expose to people. For example, like the ability to put evals in the hands of our customers is a direct result of our team trying to gain those insights out of a bunch of other stuff. And so like for us, we take a look at that and we say like, okay, how do we build something around this? And even if we do, what is sort of like, what are we trying to get out of that? And what are we trying to put in the hands of our customers, and what do they want out of it? And so in a way, like all of these, like observe and protect and evaluate, like they're all interrelated. They all play a role in the way that we think about a holistic product. They play a role on how we think about the future based on what we see today. So really, I mean, all of those are like critical to how we think about things and how we plan.
It's been such a joy, having this conversation with you, Vinny. And I know our whole team at Galileo is so thankful to be able to work with you and the rest of the team at Twilio on this as we build the future of AI. It's so exciting to have such an incredible partner in the space and to see all the work that you and your team are doing around AI assistance and beyond. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was a distinct pleasure to have you.
Oh, thank you so much. We feel the same way, and it's been such a great ride with you guys, and looking forward to seeing what we can build together.
Yeah, I think we're just getting started. And I would love to give our listeners an opportunity to learn more about what you're up to or the work that you're doing at Twilio. Where's the best place they can go?
Yeah, for my team, twilioalpha.com. That'll give you sort of like the latest update and what we're working on. We're releasing blog posts and papers and new code and experimental code and all sorts of stuff. That's the place to go to check out what's going on in our team. I also work with the OWASP Foundation. There's a lot of security initiatives going on in that space as well. genai.owasp.org is another one you can go to find the latest work that's going on in the security space as well.
Fantastic. Vinny, thank you so much. We will link all of this. Everything that Vinny's discussed will be in the show notes. So, listeners, make sure to check it out. And everyone, thank you so much for tuning into season 1 of Chain of Thought. This is the final episode of this first season. So, this is our wrap moment. We'll be back on January 8th for the start of season 2 of the podcast. And we've got a lot of incredible guests in mind. We'll have to have Vinny back for sure. And I think there'll be a lot of folks who you may recognize from X or from LinkedIn and from elsewhere who you'll be very excited to hear from. A huge shout out to all of you for tuning in and for everyone who has supported the show, your likes, your reviews, your comments. We've gotten such positive feedback and we're learning so much from this process. So thank you. As I said, we've got big things in store for season 2. Things are not going to slow down for Chain of Thought, and we'll be there to help you and your teams navigate AI throughout 2025. Thank you again. And Vinny, thank you so much. It's been fantastic chatting with you.
Likewise. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. We'll talk to you all January 8th. Happy holidays, everyone.